Well, the first reading from Ezekiel reminds the prophet, or God is reminding the prophet, that he needs to tell people when they're doing wrong, or it's going to be on his head. Seems there are a lot of people around that like to do that today. And it is true, we're all called to be prophets, but how exactly? What are we being prophets of, and for whom? And that's why the gospel could be a help to regulate our behavior in this regard. This passage that we just heard was used very much in my moral theology, learning about what we called fraternal correction, when and how you should actually go and tell somebody, you're not behaving correctly. And it's useful. There were three primary conditions when you can and should correct your brother or sister. And the first one is you have some role in their lives. So you don't just go searching on the internet or go walking down the street and correcting people for whatever. You have to have some role in their lives. It has to be a responsibility, in a sense, that you have because of your closeness to them. Okay, that's number one, and that already excludes most of what goes on around. Second, it has to be important. It can't be, you left a chocolate wrapper on the floor. Not something that's, minor. If you're really going to correct someone, it needs to be a serious matter. Like a drug intervention or something like that. And third, we have to have all three together. There has to be some reasonable hope that the person is ready to listen. No, that's not always the case either, is it? So if any one of those three is not in play, then you shouldn't be in play either. Because the fact is that we go around making judgments about people and wanting to police them in completely inappropriate situations, and for whatever motives, it's our own egos that want to feel that they're right, that they're doing good, in their own eyes. But Jesus, don't forget, one of the main things he did say to us is, don't judge. So are you really sure, that what's going on in a person's life is something that needs to be corrected? Do you know their whole situation? Do you know what God's deepest desire is for them? You should be very careful. We need to listen. Well, that's the thing. What we really need to do is do what the responsorial psalm today exhorts us to do. And I love to point out that this Psalm 95 that we just heard has been used all through the centuries by the church in its official liturgy of the hours as the opening prayer every day, called an invitatory psalm. It's inviting us to our daily prayer, inviting us to our daily life. And this is what the church has decided we need to hear every morning. And what did we hear? Or what should we be hearing? If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. So there are a couple of things there. First, we need to expect that God will be speaking. Not just something we heard, 10 days ago or 10 years ago. Not just something that we read or thought. No. What is God today speaking to you in your heart? And are you listening? If today you hear his voice. That's the second thing. God is speaking, and are you listening? Or are you so sure you already have all the answers and you don't want to be bothered by some other inspiration of the Spirit that might contradict what you thought or said before? If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. And that's the third thing. He's speaking, we're listening, and we don't harden our hearts. No. God can't say that to me. No. Something else is what I heard 10 years ago. He can't be saying that to me now. Yes, he can. And you have to be open and docile and humble and open enough to be able to receive a revelation you may not expect or even want. Like, don't judge that person. So many people, even in the church, are judging these people, fill in the blank. And how do you know what God is doing in them now? And whose name are you speaking? And who gave you the right? First condition, you don't have any role in these people's lives. God didn't commission you to correct them, to go prowling the internet and trying to incriminate people, for example. So if you want to show your love of God and your openness to God, listen. That's the way you can show your love for God and serve God today, is listen for his voice and follow his inspirations. And now let's transfer that to people. Love of God, love of neighbor, right? Great commandments. So we need to love. That's the main thing. We're not called to judge or to correct or go sniffing around for faults that we think are faults anyway. But we're called to love. And Jesus is very clear. I give you one new commandment. Can you manage that? One new commandment, to love one another as I have loved you. And how did he love us? Well, that just brings us to this other note here in the gospel today. This passage about taking them to the church, and then this comes from the early community, which is fine, but it doesn't come from Jesus' mouth. Any reference to the church is already the early community reflecting on itself and putting it in the gospel, which is fine, but that's where it's coming from. But when it says, if he refuses to listen to the church, let him be as a tax collector or a sinner, a Gentile or a tax collector. Well, if Jesus were saying that, he would be saying, come and have dinner with them and love them and spend time with them the way I spent time with tax collectors and prostitutes and tax collectors and prostitutes and sinners. So it clearly doesn't come from Jesus, because Jesus was totally different. So we don't reject anybody, because Jesus did not. So that part of the gospel needs to be really examined and measured against Jesus' own words and his own conduct. Okay, so there we are. If we're going to really love another person, it means accepting them and welcoming them. You can only show your love and your welcome by welcoming, as Jesus did. Then you can have a conversation. And what's the main ingredient of a conversation? Listening. Yes, you're welcome in our church, even though I don't quite understand your lifestyle. But tell me about it. Tell me about your faith experience. Tell me about your life journey. Tell me about the way you've experienced God's grace in your lives. Listen and shut up. Shut up with your judgments and shut up with your exclusion. That's showing love. And that's what you'll do. As you listen, show your love for God by listening every day. Show your love for others by welcoming and listening every day. You might actually learn something, both from God and from the people that you were busy judging and rejecting and excluding for all sorts of holy reasons. Yeah, right. Because Paul reminds us today, love is the fulfillment of the whole law. He basically just repeats Jesus, right, who just said, I give you one new commandment, to love as I have loved you. He says love is the fulfillment of the law. So if you love, you're fulfilling everything. Never mind all the other commandments. All you need to do is love, yourself included. Yourself first of all, love your neighbor as yourself. That's already pretty hard. And then just love. As Paul explains, love does no harm to the neighbor, so any of the other commandments like don't steal, don't lie, don't kill, etc., is fulfilled by love. Love is the fulfillment, the perfection of the law. So if both Paul and Jesus say it, it's pretty trustworthy. So in our very polarized and hate-filled culture, sometimes even in the church, we should have be giving a better example than that. But certainly in our society and in our homes even, where there's so much judgment, so much exclusion, so much trying to correct others. How about a little love? How about listening calmly, learning, receiving, welcoming? That's what the church asks us to do every day with God, and that's what God and Christ ask us to do every day with one another. So let's get with it.